superintendent of schools. I'm glad to see several of you here, all of you. Maybe more will roll in. We hope for, 10, 20, 50, 100 people. It's an opportunity for us to really share what we've been doing over the last couple of years with this building project and why it's important. And we thought, hey, we've done a lot of meetings. We've had a lot of Zoom meetings, remote meetings. I love that, don't you? Wow, it's a student from way back when, by the time, way long time. But the nice thing about tonight is we're in the building, so you'll get to see it. Some of you probably know it. Some of you may not know it. And at some point tonight, we'll take a trip around the building so you can see it firsthand. First thing I want to do tonight is show you a video. And I would say our group at the high school, WADM, put this together. Because I can tell you, if I put it together, it would look like picture, word, some of what you are familiar with. This is much better. So let me just give you a minute to take a look at this video. I think it'll just give you an idea of why are we here.
Welcome to Meadow Elementary School. Countless numbers of students, teachers, and staff have entered here to begin their academic journey in the Meadow Public Schools. Well, our school has served this community for many years. It is time to take an honest look at the district's ability to adequately serve all students with this current building and its surrounding grounds. The common areas are places where our school family can gather for meals, assemblies, and celebrations. However, when these common areas are taken over by the need for storage, have damaged from water or wear and tear, or are no longer large enough to accommodate the growing population, those gatherings are damaged. Vital components of the building are no longer able to properly serve our students and staff. Some of our most cherished and important work is done in the classroom themselves. Here, our students learn the fundamentals of education and develop friendships and bonds with each other that last a lifetime. One positive thing that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic was the affirmation that learning in person in a building with clean air, proper temperature regulation, and adequate infrastructure is the best way to foster lifelong learners. Upgrades to current facilities are needed to ensure this can continue. And while the classroom provides the academic side of school life, the playgrounds and fields provide the crucial release of energy and engagement essential to every child. Having a safe and inclusive outdoor space that can be enjoyed by all of our students is truly the only way to nurture and cultivate their bodies along with their minds. Join us in our efforts to provide the best possible education for our students. Let's work together to build a new elementary school building that meets the needs of all students and staff.
I really could not have said it any better. I want to thank Hannah Fulham, the teacher from the high school, and the students of WABM who certainly put that together in a short time and really gave you a glimpse of Green Meadow. So thanks for paying attention. I next want to turn it over to one of our building committee members, Nick. You're up.
Thank you. You're welcome. Hi, my name is Nicholas Kane. I'm a co-chair of the building committee. I've been on the committee for a couple of years now. Jerry Colbert is our actual chair. I couldn't make it tonight. I really wanted to. But I just want you to see here the list of people, a long list of people that have been part of this team. Most of them since the beginning. I think we've had a very low turnover, a couple people here and there, and that's about it. Who've been on the journey with us since the beginning. Jerry, Anthony Day, and a few other people, Mary, I think, were part of the high school project. So we actually had some people who come back to repeat the school process again to strive to get it right.
They did learn.
Glutton for punishment. So I don't need to really go through everybody here, I don't think, but if if you have any questions about any of the members, let us know. Everybody here has been a good contributor, has a professional background, either academically with the school, professionally is in the building or construction industry, engineering industry. So everybody's had something to contribute along the way here. I think it's even a little bit later in the project, we've got our sustainability committee from the town involved. We pulled them in as well, so we've got pretty much a good representation. People from the town as community members, people from the administration, and people from the town administration as well. I think that's about all I need to say about our group. I think it's a good group, and we've been really dynamic so far. Thank you.
So on the side here is just past public meetings we've had thus far. So we're showing essentially the first half of the MSBA feasibility study, all the public meetings had, so that's that 22 public meetings, and then kind of the second half of the feasibility study, which is the schematic design phase of the Mass School Building Authority process, and that's that 21 public meetings. So when we say public meetings, building committee meetings, community forums, we're presenting at select board meetings, et cetera, school committee.
This doesn't even include the OPM selection committee meetings. We had committee meetings before we had a committee, and before we had the rest of our team involved. So there's even dates before this where we've been together as a group and been working towards this goal.
So with that, I'll hand it back over to Superintendent.
So excited to come back to the front. I'm going to ask Principal Rulo, who really just disappeared because he knew that I was going to say join me. So he will join me. But this is funny. This is like a new catchphrase that if you are in education and you do professional development and you do anything, expanding your education, this is a term that your why. Whether you're talking about belonging, whether you're talking about curriculum, whether you're talking about a building project, your why. It's kind of the heart of why, in this case, why do we need a building? And so you can see on the slide, and I'll have Principal Rulo talk about several of these things, what we have overcrowding, we have inefficient systems, and if you've been around and followed the history of Green Meadow, you know that this was a wonderful building. And it has served the community well. And it ran into some problems in the recent past, and it's 50 years old. It's tired. It's old. It's currently got, how many rooms with the unit ventilators? 8 rooms. Oh, you were right. 8 rooms that when we had, if you remember, we had a mild winter this year, right? Sort of. Except for a week where it was like minus 45. And during that week, 8 unit ventilators that heat our classrooms froze, poof. And because, I know you'll follow this, it's 50 years old, we can't just go order new parts because they don't exist. So what do? We figure out how to solve this quickly because we need our kids in school and our teachers in schools. We put foam insulation on the outside so the cold air can't get in. We put space heaters in. We have the Maynard Fire Department come check everything and give it its blessing, which they did. And luckily for us, that was the only time it was negative 45, and then it became a very mild winter, and we got through. But that's part of our why. The lovely building is at end of life. That's the failing mechanical part. The non-ADA compliance is almost kind of comical. At the end of this, or in a little while, when some of our professional team over here says it's time to take a walk, if you haven't walked the building, you'll understand why skateboarding and roller skating would be very popular in this building. Yet they are so far from ADA compliant. So there are a bunch of pictures and there are more information. Principal Rulo, use your teacher voice. You're up.
So taking a look, this is the drainage areas that we have. The first picture is where it's coming down, lack of gutter situations. It's deteriorating the outside of the building. Parts of the building slowly, the cement parts are falling apart. The second picture is down below. They have some areas where there's some stone around it. Again, years and years of this taking place. There is no drainage, and this is your picture of your windowsills that are there. And it's just, again, the deterioration of all of that material. It is just no longer an educational space for kids to be able to learn. The roof side is, you have moss growing up, they're lacking the areas, the drainage that's going on. In this area, this is an outside door that is used in order to get back into one of our preschools. We have to have air conditioning in the rooms because there is no type of air ventilation system that is there. So we have have to have an air conditioner if you want to be able to use this school throughout extended day services, extended year services. This is our bathroom. You will be noticing there seems to be missing a few parts in that bathroom. And the part there is you can't get them anymore. In order to fix that, they have to open up all the walls in that bathroom in order to get that plumbing to work. These are the issues that we're having for the kids for them. And unfortunately, as time goes on, and I hate to say this, we do our very best. A custodial crew does a wonderful job, but when things deteriorate, people don't look at it the same way, and then they don't treat it the same way. And that's unfortunate.
Thank you, guys.
So just so you know, as we continue tonight, we have Phil Colombo, our owner's project manager, part of the team, Chris LeBlanc, again, part of the design team. Phil is from Colliers International. Chris is from MDG Mount Vernon Group, the design team, and Marty, last name?
Vicky.
Vicky, thank you. So you'll be hearing from them, especially as we get into the more technical aspects. Phil,
Zach, appreciate
use
it.
your voice, use your voice.
So on this slide, we'll just step through project timeline. So
That is not a teacher voice, by the way.
is that okay? So we got through the designer selection process with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. You'll hear us say MSBA, that's Massachusetts School Building Authority. It's the state grant agency we're kind of working with to help get through this process and help get funding for the project. We went through designer selection with them early part of last year. Mount Vernon Group is the architectural firm and their consultants. So that was kind of the first start of what they call their feasibility study. So March and June of last year were the initial feasibility study submissions to MSBA. We're now at the point where last week we submitted what's called the schematic design submission. That's the biggest submission for the MSBA process because that's the submission that says what the ultimate project scope is going to be. So on this project, we got a ground-up building, 2 stories, 90,000 square feet, going to be located towards the back of the property, so on and so on. And Chris and team will get into the details of that. And then as well as we get into what the project budget is going to be and what MSBA share looks like relative to their grant policy, and then what the Meadow share looks like. So that submission happened last week. So then on June 21st of this year, the MSBA Board of Directors will meet to approve that schematic design submission, and that'll be kind of the start of developing a formal, what's called a project scope and budget agreement between MSBA and the town of Maynard. From there, you move into what they call their Module 5, funding the project, and that's the process where you have the local vote. So there's 2 votes required for the project, town meeting vote, debt exclusion vote. So right now, we're aiming for October of this year for the town meeting vote, and then November 7th for the debt exclusion vote. Once those dates are firmed up and finalized, we'll get that info out to the community. If the project's approved locally, we then kind of move on into the rest of design and bidding, with that process taking about 12 months. So construction will start towards the tail end of 2024, and the idea would be the new building would be constructed, complete, and occupiable for the Christmas break of 2026, 2027. Then construction would move over towards the existing building, the area of the property, abate, knock down the existing building, finish off site work. So construction would then be completed towards the tail end of spring of 2027 or early summer 2027. And then the closeout of these MSBA projects, generally speaking, takes about a year when it comes to commissioning and final paperwork, auditing, and whatnot. So final closeout of the project would be right around mid-2028. With that, I'll hand it over to Chris from Mount Vernon Group.
All right, thanks, Phil. So the MSBA process that we go through is the same for every project, regardless of ad renos, new schools, etc. This basically outlines different phases. So a little over a year, maybe 16 months ago, we did a preliminary design program phase. Part of that is reviewing and documenting the existing conditions of the school, everything that's good and bad about it, and what the options would be, site efficiencies. We work with the district to define program requirements and prepare preliminary solutions. So with Brian, Rob, and their staff, they have an educational program for the district. How many classrooms they need, how many students, what curriculum is taught, etc. So we develop that, and we look at a number of available sites in the town. So we work with Justin DeMarco and DPW on what sites were available. The majority of the town include wetlands, wells for the town's drinking water, etc. We've assembled all that information, submit to MSBA, and then enter into a preferred develop and evaluate solutions for the district. A number of ad reno solutions, a number of new construction solutions where this building would be torn down, and then one solution that would include just code upgrades, right? We take this building and only do the necessary code upgrades and necessary repairs. So we've taken all that, once again, submitted to MSBA. We've been working with the building committee with all these different options, and then they make those decisions on which options they feel are most viable based on cost and program requirements. As Phil said, from there we went into the schematic design phase with one design solution, and the building committee felt that to build a brand new two-story school and tear this building down was the best cost solution over the 50-year term that the building should last. We've also prepared a project budget and submitted that to MSBA. They're in the process of reviewing that information. So this is basically the site development that's proposed. Big picture, kind of how would we do this and where would the building go? So there's a number of items that are labeled, and you can see the new building, which is kind of like an L shape, is towards the back of the property behind this existing school. The existing school is shown in a black dashed outline, and it basically shows how we would integrate the new building construction once that school is occupied, tear down the existing, and then complete parking, roads, play areas, etc. for the kids. That phase will take place during the construction should this get approved in the fall. So this is the basic floor plan. One of the things we like to do, given the early childhood program that this school entails, pre-K to 3, is make the building easy wayfinding for the kids, right? So there's not a lot of different corridors. You can see there's one corridor that comes from the bottom left up and around to the upper right. And we create classroom neighborhoods for each of the kids, and that will entail and hold all of their necessary programs. They have a neighborhood which they can grow with their kids, etc. And then when they move from grade to grade, those neighborhoods become very similar. So as they're growing up from pre-K to K up to 3rd grade, the classroom neighborhoods are identical. There's not a different wayfinding, a different familiarity. The kids are comfortable within the classes. And as you see here, they're broken out into a number of different colors. So the yellow are the classrooms for general studies. The light blue would be all your special education classrooms. And one thing you should notice, we like to integrate them throughout the school. They're not clustered, they're integrated, so all the kids have the same learning opportunities throughout. The dark green and light green are your common core spaces, which would include your cafetorium. It does have a platform for productions, etc., and a full gymnasium. The magenta areas are administration spaces, and we try to put those. The main entrance is down in the bottom, and that comes into the main area. So as the public comes in to use the building, we can secure the classroom wings after hours, and they can come in and use the public spaces such as the cafeteria or the gymnasium after hours at night or on the weekends. But the administration gets spread out throughout the school, so there's adult eyes everywhere, if you will. And the nice thing is with these programs and these classroom layouts is there's a set of doors at each beginning of each classroom. For security purposes, we can lock those down. For at night, when the public's using the public spaces, they can't wander in. But also, during certain security events in the school, we can lock down those neighborhoods and protect our children. On the 2nd floor, you'll see this layout is very similar. So as the kids go from pre-K to K up through the 3rd grade, the wayfinding is similar. And we like to then use colors for student classroom neighborhoods to help children familiarize themselves with where they are and where they should be. Again, the same simple corridor. On the 2nd floor, we've got grades 2 and 3. And then in the middle core is our media center, art rooms. There's some administration space, an STE room, which is science, technology, and engineering for project-based learning. And that's coupled next to the media center. So our next slide will be basically a rendering looking from Great Road into the project site once it's completed. Tiger Drive will remain the same. It'll come around to the right. There'll be a split, buses and staff visitor parking in the front. And then parents can loop around the back for a separate drop-off area. So those who want to drop the kids off, they pull around to you'll see in the upper left-hand corner, there's a parking space. And on the back side, it'll show it as well. But before we change, Phil, on the right-hand side, there's 2 learning areas for the pre-K, K kids and the 1st and 3rd. That learning area will have age-appropriate play structures, safety surfacing that can be used year-round, no more of the wood chips, etc. And there's a basketball court area, etc., to accommodate all the kids. Once we take down this school, there'll be a general field area for kids to play. PE classes, the community use, right? There's youth programs in town that could use that space for practice and learning. Our next slide gives us a little bit closer view of the front entrance. You can see the play areas on the right. You can see where the road splits to the main parking areas around, and then for the bus stop, and then the parents can completely queue up and drop their kids off, where staff could be waiting at a separate entrance. Our last one here, our next one, shows an enlarged area of the play areas. Okay, age-appropriate play structures, basketball. This can also be used by the community at night. And one of the things, the location is very prominent. We met with the public safety officials, the police chief, school district resource officers, etc. They want that play area to be very visible for a number of reasons. Not only during school use, it's close proximity to school, kids don't have to cross any roads, but also after hours, when the public and community is using it, they want to make sure it's safe. So as the public safety is kind of monitoring the area and policing, they can see that to make sure that there's no unwanted activity, if you will. So this is from the south, it shows the back area. We do have some planter boxes in the back, in this lower portion, that you'll see here, the blue car for students to grow. Gardens, park their science projects. And you see as the cars come around to the right, there's a single lane drive where parents can pull up, drop their kids off safely, and enter right into the school. The same thing with the pickup, and it's separate from the bus drop-off. MSBA kind of likes this, keeps everything, so safety is priority one. And there's some additional parking in the back as well. So some of the sustainable features of the school that we're going to go through is we're going to make sure our school is LEED Gold sustainable, right? And these are some of the features that get incorporated regardless of some of the other systems that may or may not be included. Location and transportation. So we're reusing the site. We're going to provide electric EV charging stations for staff and public when they're using. Reduce parking footprint to reduce that heat island effect. Erosion sediment control, water infiltration system on the sustainable site, and a white roof membrane to reduce that reflectivity. With regards to water efficiency, low flow plumbing fixtures, which is above and beyond what the code requires for sustainable. Drought resistant adaptive plants, low maintenance for staff and the district. That'll help save money on the back end. And then water metering for any of those types of fixtures. High performance building systems within, fresh air, ventilation, heating, and cooling where needed. On-site renewable energy. So our entire roof, with the exception of any mechanical equipment, is slated to have solar panels to help offset some of the electric costs for the school. Commissioning of MEP, so a third-party firm will come in after the school is completed. They're hired by the MSBA. They'll come in and make sure all the systems have been installed, have been tuned, and are running efficient for the district. When it comes to materials and resources, there's going to be a central recycling area in the school so that the staff and custodians can recycle all the materials appropriately. The building materials with improved life cycle impacts are always chosen and specified, and then the contractor will be required to recycle 90% of any construction and demolition waste. It doesn't end up in landfills. So that's a big positive. And then the big one nowadays, especially with the recent COVID issues, is indoor environmental quality. So we're looking to install low emitting VOC materials. Indoor air quality management plan with the district and the contractor. We'll do a complete building flush out prior to construction. Running the system so that everything is clean, the air is clean when we come in, and then sufficient daylight. One of the big things to improving test scores and learning is natural light. One of the pictures you saw earlier that Rob was pointing out with the air conditioner on the wall, small window in that classroom. So the natural light in some of these rooms is very minimal. That's our lead sustainable. I'll turn it over to Marty. He can talk about some of the building systems that we've been looking at with the building committee.
Sure. Thanks. As Nick had mentioned,
committee and different team members have been together for quite a while, researching different opportunities. One of the opportunities we looked at is HVAC systems for the buildings. With the initial building committee, we had evaluated probably 6 or 7 different systems. We kind of narrowed it down to the 3 that you see on your screen here. The first one, which is a central air source heat pump system. This is an all-electric option for a building. As you know, the very strong trend now is for no fossil fuels in buildings. This is one option that will meet that criteria. So on the screen, you can see the systems. I listed some pros and cons. We have our estimated construction costs, some possible rebates, and then some life cycle cost analysis. So the life cycle cost analysis takes into account the initial construction cost, the maintenance and energy costs over a fixed term, and what the overall result is after so many years. So the last column on the right, you can see, is the life cycle cost analysis with the available rebates for some of the systems. The column just to the left of that is the ones without rebates. So just continuing on the types of system, the second system we looked at was a central geothermal heat pump.
I just wonder if you could read out the cost out loud, because you can't see.
Yeah, we can't read. Oh, sure, okay. So for our first system, our central air source heat pump, we have an estimated construction cost of that of $7,225,600. That's our top one there. Our next one, which is a central geothermal heat pump. Now this is the most energy efficient system option that we looked at. This includes a series of wells drilled into the ground, and we use the constant temperature of the earth as an energy source to both heating and cooling for this system. The estimated construction cost for that is listed at $10,259,277. Included in that particular one is some cost for a temporary heat source, and that prolongs the construction period for a little bit, so there's some added costs to that. Let's include that number.
Hey, Marty,
Yes.
can you just explain why we have to do that temporary heat source so that folks understand why we have an additional cost added to that?
Sure. As I mentioned, the geothermal heat pump system has a series of wells that need to be drilled into the ground. Right now, the most promising option to do that is at the location where the school primary is now. So from a phasing point of view, we'd have to construct a new school, provide a temporary system to get that school through the first season. Once the school has been demoed and removed, the wells can go in at the end of the project. So there's a little bit of time lag between there, and that time lag is reflected in the additional overhead costs. And the temporary heating system would be required for that first year. The last system we looked at was a fossil fuel system. So this would include gas-fired boilers with displacement ventilation systems. And I know some of the school committee members, I believe, had toured Ludlow School or Marlborough School, which is a very similar system to that. Yep. So that was the system that you saw at that school. This option has the lowest initial cost at $5,883,300. $5,883,300. Limited rebates available for this because it's a gas system. Rebates is not as available as they are with some other options. So from a price point of view, again, I understand you folks can't see the actual numbers there. Geothermal system is our highest cost at $10 million. Central air source heat pump is the next lowest at $7 million. And then the gas-fired boiler is the lowest option at $5.8 million. A couple of items to note on these that's important is the geothermal system qualifies for, at minimum, relatively attractive incentive from Eversource, our company. We've been coordinating with them with proposed systems and working on some numbers. The proposed incentive for that is just over $1 million, or $1.2 million just from the Eversource company. The next possibility for incentives or rebates is with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a relatively new program offered by the federal government. By new, I mean it's very new. I don't think anyone's gone through the process yet. There's still some unknowns with it. That program could possibly pick up a portion of the HVAC system, or it may pick up a portion of the entire HVAC system. So the possible rebates for that program can be pretty substantial. At minimum, we're thinking that it picks up 40% of the cost of the geothermal wells that we have to drill, which would be an incentive of about $700,000. If it picks up 40% of the cost of the entire geothermal system, being all the ductwork, the air handling units, the pumps, the piping, the entire school system, that rebate is almost $3.7 million. So if the full rebates are achieved, both through Eversource and the Inflation Reduction Act, the geothermal system comes in at a much lower cost, both upfront and through the life cycle of it. And I'm not sure, Phil, if you're talking about bonds and
Yep.
is it afforded there? All the rebates that I speak about come at end of construction period. So the initial upfront cost is still the same, but there's some rebate or credit available at the end of that. So that may be something we can talk at that point. So as far as HVAC, this has been a pretty well discussed topic, as is not only environmental impacts being fossil fuel versus all electric systems, but a pretty substantial cost difference between the systems also. Any questions on that before we move on?
Yeah, I'm surprised that you're still not addressing the fact that the IRS is very clear about the fact that it works for the whole system. Have the IRS information on that, and you're still carrying the idea that the only place to put the wells is underneath the existing school, which will cost you a lot of money. Not just a temporary system, but it means that you can't apply the 40% reduction to the entire HVAC system. So it ends up costing a lot to put the wells in that location. You've got a parking lot behind the school, you got a parking lot that exists on one side, and you've got a parking lot up in front. And so you've got a lot of options for where to put that well to. Why is this stuff not getting carried into this?
And Chris, I may defer to you on this.
Oh, let me just quickly say it again. There's an IRS document that indicates that the groundwater, ground source heat pump can get a 40% reduction on the whole system. So that's been documented. And the temporary systems, if you choose to put the well field underneath the existing school, then you have this lag, and you have to have a temporary system. If you have a temporary system, it means that you can't use the portion of the HVAC system to get the 40% reduction. That counts as part of the temporary system, not part of the ground source system. If you put the well field anywhere except underneath that school, you don't have that lag, and you save like $2.3 million, it's in my mind, but it's a lot of money.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I know the site civil engineer has done a fair amount of research into this.
Right, so one of the things we did look at, when we spoke with a well designer and gave him the initial plan. And basically what he says is, now keep in mind, this is still schematic design, big picture. We haven't selected all of our equipment, et cetera yet, right? That comes further in the design. So one of the things we talked about were just the general loads. He gave me an approximate well count, about 75. We've got to 500 feet or so. So one of the things he talked about is location of wells, right? So this is the key when it comes to phasing. Right now, we know we can put them in what would be the future field in a pattern, right? 25 feet apart, etc. Locating under parking areas around the building is an option, but we don't have enough information at this point to determine what the number is and the spacing requirements to meet all of the equipment that we're going to be selecting. So we're still kind of high level design. Once we get into further design, as you can see, this is the location we said we can definitely get a well field in here. So to carry the appropriate costs, we know we can do this. But is there an option to do it under parking, et cetera? Those are possibilities that we have to explore with more information and more input from the well designer themselves. So the possibilities there, we're not at that point yet. Will there be savings if we can get them under parking areas in the amount, location closer, that's a possibility in the first half of the phasing, absolutely. But there's more information that has to be obtained. We have to engage a well designer more in depth with all the specifics about the design. That comes in the next phase under the construction document phase.
But you're making a decision about the HVAC system. Shouldn't you at least have that option up on your screen now?
Well, again, there's still more information that has to be obtained. So knowing that we can get that here, if the town says, yeah, we want a geothermal system, and that's the option the building committee tells us we have to pursue, then we engage a well designer, then we start designing all the additional equipment to get the specific loads and the location, and how that works with the phasing of the contract.
But you're asking the building committee to make a decision, and you're not giving them the numbers of what is likely to be the most cost-effective option for geothermal. In other words, you're making geothermal artificially expensive for their decision.
We're making a cost, this is what I'm looking for, a conscious decision, knowing we still don't, there's a lot of information. I'm sorry, your name?
Roger Stillwell.
Roger, okay.
Yeah.
Chris. So we can communicate, you know. So Roger, as I mentioned in my response to your email, right, there are options that we can still pursue that may bring those costs down. But we want to make sure that at this level, we know what we can do, not what we possibly can do, so that our estimators can cost it out appropriately. As we move forward, if this is the system that's selected and the town approves the project for further, to move forward, then we work with the well designer, our engineers, and obtain more information, as well as our civil engineer, as to what we can absolutely do. If the cost can come down from there, that's great. But at the very least, we know this can work. So we're still at the schematic design level, which means there's still more information that has to be gone through engineering, etc. And what we don't want to do is short side and say, oh yeah, we can absolutely do that, and then down the road, when we start engaging, getting that additional information, find that it's not as viable as maybe we thought.
You're still carrying the uncertainty in the IRS response, and there isn't any uncertainty. It's right there.
Well, we show both breakdowns.
Right.
So we do show the reduction if it's on the full system. We show that number, one. And two, there isn't precedence yet of a project getting what you're saying is in black and white. So because of that, it's hard for us to say 100% you're going to get this 40% rebate on this $10 million scope of work when there's no precedence telling us that that's accurate. So in our opinion, it's best to show both breakdowns, so we're on record doing that. If folks still feel like it's appropriate to go geothermal, then that's the vote they can be done.
Okay.
I would like to understand this a little bit. So where did the idea of uncertainty come from exactly?
The uncertainty for the rebate, is that the question?
That's right.
I think it's still mentioned, no one's gone through the process yet.
Yeah, so this rebate program is that new.
Yeah.
It's quite literally that new.
Yeah, okay, all right. So, but what do you get the 40% rebate on? What parts of the geothermal system?
Correct.
Is written on the government website.
Yeah, and it's
So why would
worded.
there be uncertainty about that?
It's worded such that it could very well mean just the geothermal well portion and not the full system.
I think
And there's been plenty of forums attended, questions asked, subject matter experts, and nobody's yet committed to us what Roger's committed to us.
Well, Roger has 2 quotes from the government website, which
Yeah.
are definitive, and I'm sure he's shared them with you.
Yeah, we've seen
Sharing
them.
with
We've
everyone.
seen them before he shared, yeah.
So, what is it? You don't believe the government website or what?
No, we've seen fine print like that a lot. And next thing you know, you're not getting what you thought you were getting from the rebate. So until we can kind of look at a project, so for example, the Acton project, they're chasing this, and they haven't gotten it yet. So that's scary to us, to say to folks, because quite literally the choice to go geothermal might be this IRA rebate.
My other question, one more question. So, as I understand it, with regards to the placement of the wells, you know that there's enough room under the school. The acreage of the school is sufficient for your growth, right?
Yep. Yep.
Well, can't you calculate the area of the parking lots, the playing field? I mean,
I
that's
missed the
not.
second part, I'm sorry.
If you calculate the area of the parking lots and the playing field, it's a fairly simple calculation to see whether it adds up to the acreage of the school. Well, that would answer that question. I don't see why that question is still on the table.
Well, while your analysis is correct to calculate the area, there's a lot more information we've got to obtain. Like, there's a lot of civil information with utilities, et cetera, that have to go in and coordinate that, because we don't want to be drilling down where utilities are coming through. So when we talk with the well designer, they would not commit to, they said there's still more information that's needed we couldn't give them. The comfort is we know we can do it in this area once the school's taken down. As I mentioned earlier, I don't want to say we can do it around the school in under a parking lot if in fact once we have that additional information through civil, the well designer, et cetera, and we can't do that. So we're at the very early stages of design. There's another year of design that's got to go through once the town approves the project, engineering, calculations, the whole gamut, if you will. So we're trying to be conservative in what we're presenting to make sure that it does work at this level. Once we get down and into the nitty-gritty of more design as to the specific equipment, all the heating and cooling, and energy model that gets done to meet all that code requirements, then we can be a little bit more specific and have everybody weigh in on the possibilities. That very well may be a good option and reduce costs down the road. But at this level, we just don't have enough to guarantee that. We can tell you the well field will fit at a 25-foot space, get wells 500 feet plus or minus D to accommodate what we know now. I hope that answers.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to the topic of locating a well field that doesn't require waiting for the existing building to be down is like, we got to determine construction logistics, because that work wants to be done in sequence with the site work that's happening in that area. And if the site work in that area is not happening at that point, it's not happening until people are in this new building, then that's just what it is. We can't install these 75 wells and then disturb that area and finish up site work, 4 months later, and have a concern that these wells are going to be damaged and whatnot. So there's a little more to it than just finding an area that size-wise works. You got to think of sequencing and phasing. So a bunch of hands left. Go ahead.
I'm a little confused. I mean, there have been people concerned about the HVAC system for months and months, and you seem to have studied carefully the existing school site for the wells and not other obvious sites, that is, ones that won't require a delay to put in. The voters are in this weird position where we have to vote for something that might cost this or might cost that, but you don't have the information to tell us what the cost will be, and we don't have it. So we really are voting on a pig and a poke, and you're saying, well, this you can do, but it's the most expensive option over being able to put a well field in, say, a parking lot. So I don't understand why you didn't study places like that first.
Now, by places, you mean other sites?
Other sites for the wells, yes.
In town?
Yeah, well, no, I mean on the...
On this site?
Yeah.
So, as you know, the site is it's the school, small play area, a lot of woods in Crow Park. We were told nothing can happen to Crow Park. We understand that. It's a vital part of the community. Trees to take down is another issue, right? Nobody wants to take trees down. That's not sustainable. We understand that. So again, big picture, and correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, we've got, for the voters, a maximum budget number. As a design team, OPM, building committee, we always work to, as the project moves forward, to keep reducing that number. as opposed to expanding it. So the number before you today, the budget, is the approved budget that we're working with the town. The estimates have been put together. That would be the maximum budget you would vote for. But we hope, as the process moves forward, to continue to refine the design to bring that budget down. But I can't give you something that may or may not work with additional information being required. Like I said, we talked to a well designer. And I've been talking with Roger a little bit about this through email about alternative locations for the wells. There are possibilities, but we just don't know if they're viable as of yet. Because there's still information we need to obtain and go through with all the design team.
I was going to ask a version of what has just been asked a little differently. Will there be more solid information by the time we get to town meeting? Or is this, what we're hearing tonight, basically going to be what we're asked to vote on?
So the budget we have now is our established budget. We are going to continue to meet with the building committee because there may still be a decision on which system they want to approve. That's their decision, that's not ours. We just provide the information that we can to make them make that decision. So we have a maximum budget at this point. Once the vote is taken, and if the town does look to approve that, then we get into all the nitty-gritty details of the design. And what we are presenting now is a known entity. So some of the things about under the parking lots, yeah, we've thought about that, we've looked at it, but there's still more information to be obtained. And to tell you that that's an absolute positive solution now, and here's the cost, that I don't want to do that and then say, well, we've gone through some more design issues and things to look at, and it can't be done. How do I come back and say, well, your project should be more expensive because it can't be done that way? We're giving you the comfortable budget for the district to approve. Like I said, as a design team, we always work to bring that budget down as the process moves forward with more information. You know, our plans are very schematic. We're going to have 400 sheets of drawings right now. We've got a couple of floor plans, site plans, and sections with it. There's going to be a lot of information that's still got to be vetted and fine-tuned to get that where it needs to be for construction time.
So just to clarify, like when Chris says we have a maximum budget, the construction budget we're carrying in our budget that we submitted can support doing a geothermal system. We're going to be anticipating in the next couple of months to finalize through the building committee what system they want to go with, so that in the event this project's approved in the fall, we have a scope decided and the design work can happen from there. So that's kind of what he's talking about.
So I think the question is, when are we going to get the information about whether it's feasible under the parking lots?
That won't come until if the project's approved to move forward.
So that's the information that we needed to make the decision, which we'll get afterwards.
It's just not feasible at this time. That's why you have a maximum budget.
Why can't you go and get us the information?
Once the project is approved, then we further our design. We do energy models, things of that nature.
So can I just ask a follow-up in terms of that piece to make sure I'm understanding? I think I am. Essentially what you're saying is when these projects are implemented, there is the phase that we are in, which is a general concept of what we are going to build, and you provide general information about cost because that is the level of detail that you have at this phase of the project. In order to provide that more detailed analysis, we would essentially need to move into the next phase of design for all of the different options, which would incur significant time. So it's not a general, let's talk to the well consultant and get an idea. It's, we need you to design this well for us with all of the different aspects of the construction pieces. Is that what I'm understanding? So you essentially be doing multiple plans for one project.
How are you going to decide which system to buy when there's a $1.5 million difference in the amount of rebate you're going to get for one of the systems? So you can't justify one way or the other if you don't know how much that system's going to cost you.
But we have a maximum cost right now the number of wells.
Yeah,
Right now, we're
if
planning for
you
seven.
get $1 million more back, then it's gonna cost $1 million less to do that system. That makes it more viable compared to the solar system. The geothermal more viable compared to the solar system if you get $1 million more rebate versus a $700,000 rebate. So you need to know the answer to that question. Can you do it for $1 million less, or can't you?
Understood.
This doesn't seem like it's a hard question. I mean, you go out, you talk to the utilities, and you decide when you can put the well field in there. That's not rocket science. And you've had that question for a month, and you're still going, I don't know.
There's more information that needs to be, the design's got to progress in a more detailed fashion to get all the specifics. We're not at that level, like Colin said.
We're at a conceptual level where you've already given it to the building committee to make a decision with numbers that were already have changed dramatically. And, you know, if you're asking us to make decisions, you have to do the work to have those numbers be good.
And we've done the work for a schematic design level of detail.
None of the other systems up there are going to change in cost significantly. We're not expecting that, right? We're not doing anything. Just the geothermal system has all these big question marks around it.
That's correct. Just like the IRA, we don't know if it's 40% of the geothermal component or the entire system. That's a question we can't answer. Everybody we've talked to, I've gone to the seminars, I've talked to the geothermal group, and they said, well, yeah, do it, you'll get paid for it. Can you give me a guarantee to take to the client that they will get 40% of the entire system? They will not give us that guarantee. Everybody says that that's a possibility. They won't give us the guarantee. I can't give you the guarantee.
Ken, how you doing?
All right, thanks. I just wanted to offer some perspectives and maybe help us move on, because as Marty had mentioned, we've spent a lot of time on this already. So one thing that I'm hearing is, because of the way that the project process works with the MSBA, the team here is essentially putting in a conservative budget, or as conservative as it can be, or maybe in other words, as pessimistic as it can be. So this is kind of what I see is that this is a worst case number, because that's what holds our budget number, and then we work from that. That gives us room. You know, if we get savings, great. But if it was the other way, we wouldn't be able to increase the budget during the course of the project. So that's, I'm seeing some nodding. So that's just to help us understand why some prices seem higher than we think they should be. The other thing I will say, because I know Marty and his team put a lot of work into this, but this is early, right? So, like, we know we don't have energy modeling, right? We don't have a final design in terms of assemblies and systems. So there's a significant margin of error on the loads that we're expecting for the system, the size of the system, and not to mention cost, right? Because we're pricing it in probably the peak that we've seen in the past 10, 15 years. So I'm going to go on a limb and say there's this difference that we see in cost here over on the right, that's within the margin of error of the analysis. So there are things that we know that are certain and will impact price, but this spending a whole lot of time on something that's really within the noise, I think it's more a matter of the community and the building committee making a decision rather than arguing about what these numbers are right or whether they might be a little higher or a little lower. It's really, we need to make a decision because the analysis is as precise as it can be. We need to squint and look at it as close numbers, but these are not precise numbers. Is that fair?
Perfect, yeah. So I saw people kind of take the picture. We're going to make sure this presentation is on the project website so people can download it. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, we were talking about the temporary systems and the impact of that. You can see the two different numbers listed there, and I'll read them up. For the highest number for the central geothermal system, we're at 10.2 million, if you will, and that includes the temporary system and the extended construction period based on it. The temporary system, which we're talking about a little here, that has an estimated cost of a little under $100,000. So
mean,
Not accurate, because if you have a temporary system, then it means you can't count a lot of events in there in your 40%. So it means that your cost goes way up, way more than $100,000.
Well, the 100,000 was for the temp system for, the plans, whether a boiler or something outside to carry the building until completion. That's where that number was coming from, for that. So are you concerned that if it gets phased out, that the well system won't be included in the rebate?
Well, it would be, but,
Yeah.
but the vent will not be.
Sorry, the vetting? Oh,
The venting.
venting?
The ducts.
Yep.
The ducts and
The ducts aren't going away.
He's saying that it wouldn't qualify for the rebate because we would have already installed it if we do it after.
As part of the temporary system, it becomes part of that temporary system, and then when you install the geothermal system, you can't get the 40% on the ducts that have already.
Which that's tied into.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's accurate, but we'll look into that.
all right. So we talked about the solar arrays on the roof. There's a group or a company doing work, I believe, on the Fowler School Select that's putting solar PVs on. We engaged them and discussed what the possibilities are for this new school. So as you can see, the checkered area is those PV arrays. The annual building use is projected to be about 660 kilowatts, 660,000 watts, right? The approximate average monthly electric cost, 17,000 plus or minus, based on utility costs that we know today. The annual roof solar would generate about 240 kilowatts. And when I top it down, that would equate to about 10 cents per kilowatt hour. The approximate year one forecast savings, and they ran these numbers based on working with the town, would be about $10,200. The approximate 20-year term savings would go up exponentially to about $386,000. So initially it starts off low, but as it continues over the 20-year term, your savings becomes more because they anticipate electric costs are going to go up, but they'll maintain their negotiated rates with the district.
What was your final number? What was that?
The final number?
Yeah, you said 10,000 beginning. What was the number you ended up with?
Which one?
386, is that what it was?
386,000 over 20 years. We did look at alternative locations because one of the things with schools that are going all electric is they try to achieve a full offset of electricity, right? Generate enough on-site electricity to be sustainable to operate their systems. Now, given that, we looked at some other options. One, on the left, a full offset option one would be put some ground mount PVs in the area of the school in the field that's left. Okay? That can be done even if the geothermal wells are installed. Include some PV canopies over the parking areas. So we sent this plan to Select as well as options. And what they came back, well, first I'll come back to that. PV option number 2 would be to not put canopies in or take up the play area, but instead we would have to remove trees. There would be about 1.5 acres to 2 acres of trees that would need to be removed to get a full offset. Because what they've got to do is they've got to calculate the shade that the trees existing are to give, room between the PVs, etc., for maintenance and such. The town does not buy and install and maintain the PVs. They do a purchase and power agreement. They have another company come in that does that, and then they negotiate the price. I want to go back to option number 1 with the canopies. So when we talk to Select and ask them to run the numbers, we could get a full offset by putting canopies in and some ground mounts. The problem becomes the canopies are very costly with the structure, the supports, etc., that it does not make sense for a very small area. They're actually going to lose money. So the money you would gain, the energy you would gain from the roof, you would be giving back to the tune, I think it was somewhere around 11,000, 17,000 per year. Because they've got to incorporate the design, construction of all these supports over the parking areas. It does make sense when you have much larger parking areas. I think Acton Boxborough is one where they got a huge parking lot in the front that has canopies. Then that becomes viable because you offset the cost based on the scope. So those are two things we looked at.
All right, so on this slide is the kind of project budget that was part of the schematic design submission last week. So like has been mentioned, the construction budget within this total project budget is $66.9 million. And that construction budget, based off of the cost estimates we completed, can afford a geothermal system if the building committee in the next couple of meetings selects to go to geothermal HVAC system. So you got a $66.9 million construction budget with the soft costs that come with a project of this magnitude, so contingency for change orders, furniture, technology, and other soft costs. You're looking at a total project budget of $83.6 million. So the way the grant breakdown would be based off of our reimbursement rate with MSBA and the different reimbursement policies that MSBA has on all the different budget categories, you would be looking at a MSBA share of 35%, which is approximately $29.48 million on total dollars spent, or max 65%, and then the Maynard share would be 65% at $54.12 million. These numbers have been submitted to the MSBA. They are reviewing them. We feel pretty confident that what they come back to us with is going to be pretty close to these, if not these numbers I just presented. So in the chart on the slide here is a cost per square foot chart that you can find on the MSBA website. This is linked to their ground up projects. They have a separate chart for ad reno projects. But as you can see, kind of this orange line that kind of cuts across the right side of the slide, it just kind of shows that where we're approaching kind of our bid time for our project, these projects in this current market are bidding out at this range we're at right now. So like has been mentioned, it's we view it as a conservative budget, but in terms of what the market looks like in an appropriate budget. One, and two, like Ken mentioned earlier, the way the MSBA process works is when you submit your schematic design submission, and then a couple months later you enter into a project scope and budget agreement with them, any added cost you add to that project scope is 100% on the town's share. It does not become linked to their reimbursement. And with that, we took those numbers, so that Maynard share of $54.12 million, the town coordinated with their bonding company. These are rough estimate numbers for local tax implications. So 1 and 2, the bonding company indicated they feel they're conservative. 30-year bond, 5% interest rate. They think 5% interest rate is conservative. As well as a project of this magnitude, you're not going to do just one 30-year bond. You're going to kind of strategize your borrowing off of the drawdown of the project, so it could be a little more affordable relative to tax increases. But to give you rough conservative numbers, utilizing a Maynard share of $54.12 million and working off of a median property value of $456,144, you would have an average annual increase per $100,000 valuation of $175.83. And then an annual increase for that median property value of $817.86. Again, conservative, and the town's bonding company feels like these are numbers that could be definitely improved on. With that, we're going to hand it back to Superintendent Haas.
So what happens if we say no? If the town says no in fall? And there's a lot of talk about that. The MSBA is pretty generous, I would think. They're talking about giving the town of Maynard somewhere around $30 million. What they're waiting on is a vote from the town to say, we want to work with you. We're going to put up our portion, and we're going to accept your portion, which then covers that larger number that Phil talked about. If, however, we don't vote positively, and we say, we'll think about it, we'll come back to it. I just want people to understand that that is not a given. So we have worked really hard. The work started before I was even here in writing a statement of interest to the MSBA to get into this queue, and then they review all the statement of interests from the entire state and say, who are we willing to work with? Who do we think is a good bet? And luckily, if I'm correct, this was our first statement of interest, and they said, you know what? The town of Maynard is going to be a great partner. So we're going to invite you into this process, and it's a laborious process. These companies, these guys have been working with us for a couple of years just to get to this point. If we say no, that ends. We're with this building. That'll get to the next slide. But it's not a given that we would get re-invited to participate in this process. So there may not be a next time, and if there is, it could be years in the future. And one of the things they won't pay for a second time is the feasibility study. So they offset that for a municipal, for a town the first time. That's $1 million. In my head, I don't want to give them back $1 million. So that's part of what happens. And if we don't know, then we stay in this building. And it's, as you walk around in the pictures you saw, it's some of those same issues that our facilities are failing us to some extent. It's undersized. It doesn't meet our programmatic needs. It's challenging for students and teachers. We're going to lose the $30 million. Just, they're going to take it off the table. It will go to a different district. So we would lose that. But I want people to understand that it isn't as easy as like, oh, we're interested now. Like, we're feeling it, we got the information, and we're going to go all in. We may not have that opportunity 2, 3, 4 years down the road. It's just an unknown that nobody can predict.
Yeah, the only thing we would add is these projects don't get more affordable. So if it doesn't pass, that local share that you heard about, 54 million, it will increase without doubt.
One quick question.
Yes?
One data point you have not shared with us is how many students currently reside here?
Good question. Off the top of my head,
435.
435
Yeah,
students.
435 students.
How many will the new building have?
How many?
Will the new building have?
Same amount, because, and plus a little bit more, because the MSBA does not allow you to go well above. Because there's a formula that they
Yeah, so this building is roughly 78,000 square feet.
Yes.
The new building is 90,000 square feet, so we're confident it can fit.
No plan to absorb the additional growth that's happening in this town.
No, every MSBA project you design, you've got to have a location where a potential future addition can go. So that is part of the process. That would be an addition, correct, yeah. So the way the MSBA process works is you have an enrollment linked to your agreement with MSBA. And based off of that enrollment, you have a space program that creates the size of your building. And if you choose to be that district that chooses to make a building 100,000 square feet bigger than what the MSBA space program says you can, that 100,000 square feet of building is going to be 100% on the town.
And those enrollment projections, I believe, or those enrollment figures include an analysis or projection. So it's not like the MSBA is just looking at our numbers here.
Yep.
It includes a projection that they do, and they are very persnickety if you say, no, we disagree with your projection. I mean, we went through this with the high school build, that we thought, hey, we're going to get bigger, and lo and behold, we did, but you don't get to challenge it, unfortunately.
Didn't you project more students because of the addition of preschool space?
Yeah, so we got 395 students K through 3, and then another 100.
Another
K.
for pre-K.
Yeah. So 495.
So it's more than what you had.
So they go 60 students more, most 60 students more.
So it was 495?
Yep, including pre-K.
So code upgrade, base repair. So one of the points of this slide to me that I want to, sort of the message to you is that I don't want us to think that this project is over here at $83 million, or we don't have to do anything and we're at zero. And we're just going to continue on for the foreseeable future. Because as you've seen, and as we walk around, you'll see this building isn't able to be at zero. So to bring it up to code, which we will quickly hit a limit which says you have to bring it up to 2024 code is at a price tag of about, correct me if I'm wrong, $34 million. Is it on?
Yes.
Oh, it's on that slide. Okay, I can barely read the slide, and I'm in the front. So what I really want us to think about is we're not paying $83 million. I mean, the town's not being asked to fund 83. It's closer to 54 to get $83 million worth of product, if you will. And if we don't look at that option and we go the other direction, then we're really still looking at $34 million to bring us up to code. So that's kind of the message I want us to think about. We're really thinking about this differential of 34 to 54. And the big difference is the 34 simply cleans this up to bring it up to code, but it still has a lot of limitations. And the 54 brings us up to really an $83 million building that goes far into the future with everything we would need to support our students and staff. Yes, ma'am.
Good question. How many years have we deferred maintenance? So we're putting like appears that all this stuff didn't happen in the last year. We're looking at a lot of them.
It's a great question, and I can't like give you an exact answer of how many years. I think that the school district has, in all fairness, done as much as they could do with the funding that they've gotten year after year after year. And you're right when you say, if you look around at districts, typically what doesn't get done, schools don't get the most funding for maintenance. And if you look at our budget, that's not where most of our budget goes. And that's not a Maynard issue, that's a funding issue on a national level, if you will. Yes, we do. You are absolutely right.
Brian.
Yes?
She's out of here.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Can I just clarify a couple of figures? Is it the average homeowner will increase their cost through their taxes by $800 something? Is that?
Yeah, so that's a very much an estimated number. Conservative should get lower, but median property value, $465,144 per property, $817 annual.
So second question, is the biggest debate, would you guys say, that between the estimated rebate price versus the top price of the geothermal system being about $5 million, is that what you feel like is the biggest holdup between us getting the yes vote, which would bring the cost from 83 down to $78 million?
It's a great question. You look like you're about to start.
So, based off of how public meetings have gone and what seems to be the biggest topic, I would say the HVAC system selection is the big one.
So then, if you just distribute that share of the $5 million onto that 817 additional median tax increase, it's a very small amount. Maybe the messaging, I would suggest the messaging from people who want this vote to pass should be focused on, we're not deciding on the HVAC issue right now. And you should, say there will be community input on that process moving forward, but if you don't get a guess, then the building's most likely not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
Great point.
Great point. The other point relative to that increase is that that is assuming that full local share is going to need to be borrowed. Generally speaking, on these projects, so we say we get approved and we get a $83 million budget, you're probably not going to spend $83 million on this project. You're going to spend $80 million. You're going to spend 81. Generally speaking, these MSBA projects, you don't spend that full budget. So therefore, you're not going to have to borrow for $54 million. And again, you're going to borrow based off a drawdown schedule, not one 30-year bond. So the numbers are going to improve, but you make a great point. Oh, sorry. Yep.
Is this kind of a classic issue between a couple things? Governments in general have a capital side and an operating side, right? And I've seen before where the capital side was where all the discussion happened. And the operating side, once it was built, consultants and everybody, they disappeared. And the public is left with the ongoing cost side, the operating budget. And there's all this business about you can't mix them, you have to use this one for bond, you have to use that one for annual budgets and all that. And I think that's one of the big sticking points about the HVAC system is I think there's a lot of trust, and I think that trust has to be built to the public to say, we have thought carefully about all of that because we don't want to be left holding the bag if a decision is made at this point for a system that costs less now, and then down the road, we really get soaked. I think that's the main thing. It's like, is there enough openness here? Is there enough understanding for people to say, okay, I trust you, that you've really covered it? Otherwise, I don't think people are going to be happy. And a lot more friction to having it happen.
Yeah. And if I could, one part of, and that's a great question. That's a very common question that's there. You don't want to save money up front and then pay twice as much in operating costs or 3 times as much in maintenance throughout the life of the system. So one of the exercises we go through is a life cycle cost analysis, and that takes that all into account, and we project that out as what would be the final cost after 20 years or 25 years complete, including the initial cost, the operating, and the maintenance systems throughout them. So we have a preliminary one here tonight that we showed earlier, and I know the screen's a little small, but the numbers to the right of this spreadsheet list those costs for a 20-year outlook. What will happen on the next phase will be more detailed information. There'll be energy models done, more design, and that life cycle cost number will keep being developed. But that's essentially what we're trying to capture here. Not only is it the upfront cost, the initial construction cost, but how much is it going to cost to run the building every year? What's the maintenance cost? If you save money upfront for, so I'm going to call it a cheap system now. These are cheap systems, but a bargain system may be better. But you have to replace that. Well, the maintenance cost of that is 3 times what another system would be. In the long run, you're going to pay more for the system. So the life cycle cost system tries to account for that.
So are you, I mean, I've seen graphs where there's a dot in the middle and then there's a line above and below. It says, okay, here's what we have put as our number. But it could go as high as this or as low as that because of the unpredictability of energy markets, among other things, right? Somebody told me the other day, there's no natural gas futures more than 4 years out to the future. After that, nobody has any control of the price. It's a total crapshoot at that point. So how do you come up with a number when you don't, I mean, the building's going to last 30 years. If the gas price is only known for 4 years, how do you resolve that?
And that's what we do. This is all based on historic data, based on projections moving forward. But again, there is no guarantee. 10 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about an all-electric system because they weren't cost effective. Technology wasn't there. So now we're at that point. But if we're projecting this out for 20 years, 30 years, or 50 years, the further you go up, the less certainty is in those numbers. So we try to do it on a conservative amount based on historic data, other projects, kind of industry standards. And it's an estimate. If you come to me 20 years from now and say, well, that was supposed to be 8.3 million and we're at 8.9 million, I would say that was pretty good. Yeah. So it is. It's an estimate based on that, but there's just global instability. Fuel oil prices fluctuate, as you said. Energy fluctuates. The inflation that we're seeing now, I don't think if we were doing a school, 5, 6 years ago, the inflation projection over time would be much less. So those numbers would be different. So
that would all be thrown out by now.
Yeah, so we try to capture everything we can based on the information available today, and that's where we go with that. But it is a good point. We want to look at the entire life of the building.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, I think one. I'm not sure who's first.
This is maybe more of a concern, but in that life cycle analysis, I'm thinking about how the fossil fuel school might not, it's not going to have AC, full air conditioning in the classroom. It's going to have that sort of dehumidifying system, which I don't know, I guess I don't trust that that's going to be sufficient to cool the classrooms, especially for vulnerable kids. So if we, have that system in place and then a year in, find out that that's not sufficiently cool and then we have to add in some sort of new air conditioning system, I don't know that that's reflected in this cost either. So I don't know if that's a question or a concern, but I'm not so much.
On the cost for the different HVAC systems, the geothermal system is considering full cooling.
Sure, I'm talking about the gas.
Yeah, for the gas one, we do have cooling in certain rooms. There's all the special ed rooms are cooling. The administration areas and the large areas.
But not the classroom.
The general classrooms are dehumidified.
So if I was a teacher or a kid, and it's, you know, I mean, I think 3 weeks ago,
Yep.
it's April, and it was, you know, 89 degrees. And that's just gonna happen more often, as the climate's changing. So you know, whatever system we have, I think we need to have AC in the classrooms. And I'm not sure that that's reflected, if we're gonna have to add something in.
Right, and that's a choice that the district can make, the town can make.
Is that made clear that there's no AC in that one? Because I think everyone knows after year one that you need AC units or, like I think Principal Berlos said, it's going to be a year-round facility in summers and stuff, so it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, what we've had in other schools.
I guess that should be.
Right, and I mean, 2 schools that have been operating just very recently, a couple of years into it, with displacement ventilation, is all the feedback we're getting from them is that the rooms are very comfortable. One, because it's a very high air exchange rate, you bring in a lot of fresh air that's dehumidified, so the rooms are cool, and portions of the school are fully air conditioned. We have another project that we did, displacement ventilation, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, Warren School. Same concept, just dehumidified, not fully air conditioned, and the feedback from that group has been the same. Now granted, temperatures are changing as we all know, and if the school year goes year round, that could be an issue. So that's a decision that kind of needs to be made. If the school's not fully occupied, you can take advantage of the areas that are air conditioned during summer, but there's some flexibility that has to be discussed and involved and see where it goes. But the feedback from, and I want to keep saying, some of the school committee members went to Ludlow. So, exactly, Marty. Yeah. There are a few building committee members that toured the Ludlow School. That was recently opened a couple of years ago. It has an air displacement system. The classrooms have displacement ventilation, which again, large amounts of fresh air, which is great for the recent pandemic issues we've dealt with. The air is brought in, dehumidified, it's delivered low to the ground in large volumes, and then we have exhaust fans in the center, so that air washes the occupants, the equipment, takes out the sweat, takes out the contaminants, exhausts it out, and new airs come in.
Do you know what month that they were touring that?
I'm sorry?
What month did they tour that?
So it was late June last year. It was a very humid and hot day. School had just got out. And they can probably tell you that if you go in spaces that were air conditioned versus non, you couldn't tell the difference. And in my experience, the air conditioned spaces get a little bit stuffier because they're not as well ventilated as the displacement system in the classrooms. But Nick, Mary, or Ken, they were there.
It was 90 plus degrees. I'm saying what July was in, I apologize, but it was 90 plus degrees the day that we went. I had to ask the question at the end of an hour plus long tour that we were in the building, which spaces were conditioned and which spaces weren't, because I couldn't tell the difference. Now, full disclosure, it wasn't an occupied building. We're walking through. It was just the 6 or 8 or 10 of us that walked through, so that there's a difference when it's occupied. But I was pleasantly surprised at how well the system performed and how it felt.
We got one more slide. Can we do one more slide and then we're done? This is Chris's.
So there has been a question about Fowler School and why wasn't an addition renovation considered for that. So we looked at a couple of quick items. First and foremost, the statement of interest that was submitted to MSBA by the district did not include that option, and they don't allow you to go back. If they approve that particular statement of interest for an add, reno, or new school on this site to this building, they do not consider any other options. We did look at a couple of things that we've dealt with other school projects that are relative to the same kind of concept. So the very first one is you would still need a large addition for the 395 or 495 with the pre-K students and staff. The other thing is that school is not designed for the early childhood grade population that you have here. The toilet rooms have different size fixtures for the younger children. The support spaces, the classrooms, the gymnasium cafeteria will be designed for those children as well, adjustable basketball rooms. I'm not sure if they have that at Fowler or not. The common spaces at Fowler, those larger spaces that will be utilized by the entire population, cafeteria, kitchen, etc., are not designed to add another 500 kids at this point, so they would have to be renovated or added on. The other thing is it would affect current site features, right? So you have the school, you have a nice play field in the back, you've got generous parking, the rest is wooded. So if you build that addition on your play field or parking, you now have to take down more trees for parking or play fields or find other methods, including age-appropriate play structures. Middle school isn't going to have the small structures that are designed for this type of a building. Those kids usually use basketball courts, play fields, soccer, etc. And then there's always, with any addition renovation, school disruption, whether it's phasing, how that works, renovating spaces, etc. So ultimately, as I note below, a full study would have to be done to really understand the school needs to combine everything, as well as what those potential costs would be.
Chris, I just want to just had a thought too. You spoke about the common areas, the gym and the cafeteria and the library and that. And you also have to think in terms of your 650 students at Fowler. So adding an additional 500 kids to that pressure of, how do we do it's logistics, how do we do lunch, how do we do cafeteria and things like that people need to understand too.
So with that, that concludes the presentation. Thank you so much for attending. On the slide here is the project Facebook page link and project website link. We'd love it if you guys snap a pic of that. Follow the project on Facebook. Questions? Yeah.
Yeah, just really, I maybe should have introduced myself. My name's Ned Green. I live on Thompson Street. I went to design school. I'm now at the 10th floor at Mass Art, and worked for Stamsky McNary, civil engineering, for a little while, and did some stuff. What I keep seeing on these slides, I know I've talked about it in Facebook, and I've had some emails, is the pedestrian walkway. You cross 117, and that's it for the kids. It's awesome. The kids, that's it. Like, we have Donald, the crossing guard. I'm a little bit biased. My kids have never taken the bus, really. We live too close. I've got my daughter's in my last year here. You actually won't have kids in the school, but if you look at that, again, we have the kids. That's the best one, if you can believe that. The kids crossing, people driving 20, 25 miles an hour. They're crossing that Tiger Drive. Then they get on this side, and then they cross it again. What we have right now is brilliant. They cross 117, and they walk to the school. It's really, really great to not have them crossing those streets because people are going so fast. And it's just like, quite like civil and engineering standpoint, just once you cross 117, and I was even thinking, and I don't know if you could do this, have the parking lot from the Crow dump out on the Tiger Drive, right? And have that, just that intersection, have all that instead of having 3 lanes coming in and out of Great Road right there. Funnel that traffic there, but Donald can, navigate traffic and the buses a little bit more. Not having kids, they're going to be going 20, 25 miles an hour across that Tiger Drive thing. Kids crossing that. Now, I understand we do need to get kids to Fowler. I do understand that. But the idea that we have here is so great. My kids cross 117 and they can walk into school and never cross the road.
Yeah, understood.
Okay.
Can we go back to the AC versus the dehumidifier thing for a minute? If the dehumidified air system is really wonderful, why are we also doing AC in other parts of the building?
So the state requires it for special education classrooms and support spaces because of the sensitivity of kids with special needs. That's a requirement. The gym and cafeteria are larger spaces, so air displacement would work a little bit harder. Am I correct?
Yeah, because of the amount of people in spaces such as that, the displacement becomes a little more cumbersome to try to get the comfort level that we're looking for.
So, and then administration, the offices are smaller, so it makes sense and it's more cost effective for air conditioning in those spaces. So we try to maximize the efficiency on both ends.
I just reached out to some of our team committee members. The high school built not that long ago. There's not had air conditioning in the rooms. And over the last few years, they've not been complaining about the temperature in the rooms. There is one room in the corner that has a lot of southern exposure with an excessive amount of glass that gets warm, not hot. So modern construction with tight envelopes and the right kind of glass doesn't suffer like buildings like this, which have not the right kind of solar protection, the right kind of exterior envelope, air is leaking in everywhere, it's the hot air. So when you consider not not what you're doing to fight the heat, and building better to fight the heat. That's just one of the things we think about when we're looking at these characteristics. Is it worth it to save some money if we're spending it on the envelope and we don't let the wrong energy in? That's some of the things we're considering. And at the high school is an example of a modern building in town that is, still, 10 years ago, but in the right direction towards energy conscious envelope design. That's just a fact of it. I talked to a couple people, got the stats of people in high school. I'm not in high school, so I didn't know, but got the
I'd like to raise the perspective I have on the future costs of, belaboring the point of the heat pump versus the boiler. I went through some of that in my own house, turned out. I have both, in fact. But one concern I have about the boiler is that you don't have much, it's hard to predict the future costs. We have no predictability over what natural gas will be 10, 15, 20 years from now. That variable is not part of the heat pump question, because the heat pump energy you're essentially getting for free. And it's going to, other than maintenance costs and the cost of the equipment, but you're not paying for the energy you're getting from the ground. And there's a cost to go, so that's one unknown that you don't have to be concerned about. And that's definitely, leads me toward the heat pump regardless of the other factors involved.
Like the electric system, like the geothermal.
Either one. If you're, anything that you're not dependent on the price of the fossil fuel. And, it's not like I hate fossil fuel. I still have my old combustion engine car. But anyhow, thinking of future costs, one is down to go up, and the other one is a lot more predictable.
Well, I just wanted to point out that the future electricity cost is also a variable. Right now in Massachusetts, 77% of our electricity, sorry, something really, I'm sure it's 77% of our electricity comes from natural gas. So it is I just want to put that there.
No, understood. The heat pump, the heat pump does not have that as a factor. So,
I don't want to
unless you know the way the natural gas.
One thing that I'd really like to point out from the most recent version of the cost analysis is that the operating and the utility costs for geothermal are less than any of the other systems. So whatever the upfront costs, it will pay back. The only question is, how long is that going to take, right? And that depends on what that initial cost ends up being. Whatever rebates we get, whatever that ends up looking like, it will pay back, right? The question is just how long, right? Where's the break-even point, right? If we get nothing, yeah, it takes a long time, right? If we get more rebates, we factor in the savings from the solar, we factor in the alternative energy credits that the geothermal system will produce, which I have not seen talked about anywhere in here. That's market price, so there's a lot of uncertainties in that, but there's even more money that's going to come our way doing geothermal than what's been counted in here, right? The geothermal will pay back. The question is just how long. So if we want to get a handle on long-term finances in this town, this is a great way to do it, right? That 25-year replacement cost, because I looked at the detailed life cycle cost analysis, is lower for geothermal than it is for natural gas. You have to replace the entire boiler system. You don't have to replace the entire system for the geothermal. That 25-year replacement cost is lower. For emissions, right, yes, a lot of our electricity comes from natural gas. Between now and 2050, that's going to go to zero. That is the state's plan. They have legally binding requirements to go to net zero in 2050. That's going to go away. Even now, the emissions for annual electricity use versus gas is lower. It's 1/3 of the emissions. You run the numbers.
Take one more question and then we're off you guys a quick
Just a
tour of the
question
building.
about the, I'm going to stand up because I know the sound is cooler around here. It's hard to hear. You were talking about dehumidifying versus AC. isn't it possible to have a ground source system with an air conditioning system that doesn't have to be sealed up? It can be designed so that the air circulates the same way as the dehumidifier system we just talked about. Where the fresh air comes in, is dehumidified by the same cooling system, and then comes out the building to get the advantages of that system, even though you don't have the classic boiler for the other part of the system. Is that possible?
Yeah, if we went with the geothermal option, we could definitely integrate displacement ventilation in that option. The reason we looked at full cooling, that was one of the desires at the point to do it, and a geothermal system makes it very feasible to do full cooling. But you can definitely integrate displacement ventilation into a geothermal system.
Right, in my car, I got that little switch, inside air, outside air, right?
Yep.
Same idea, right?
And as Chris had mentioned, one of the big benefits of that is how the air is introduced into the room. So we're coming in low into the room at a reasonable cool temperature, not cold temperature, and it washes over the breathing zone. So from the COVID concerns that we've all seen the last few years in schools, it makes a very clean environment for the occupants. All those contaminants get washed over the body and up, and they're exhausted with the ceiling light. So you have the dehumidifier giving you the cooling effect, but you also have that fresh air effect coming in. And this air that's coming in is 100% outdoor air, it's not recirculated air.
Right.
And it's even filtered from outside. We run it
Yes.
through a MERV 13 filter, in addition to some pre-filters. So the air coming into the room is very clean, very dry, very...
Yeah, because you have pollen and other contaminants, you want to screen out.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
If the new building project does go through, will the existing building require upgrades so that it can be used in the meantime during construction until the new building is ready? And if so, are those costs reflected in the
So, I mean, the district's been living in this building now for 50 years, so that process isn't going to change because we're building a building behind it. So, no. The idea is they live in this building for the next, till Christmas break of 2026, they move in, and it's not that.
largely unchanged, just routine maintenance?
Yes.
Correct.
We'd like to offer you guys a tour, quick tour if you want. We have to get ready for tomorrow, because we have kids all showing back up here. So my custodial crew is going to clean this up the way we're here. If you'd like to come, we're going to go around and we can go up the hill. It's a quarter mile all the way around, so put on your pedometers and we'll be all set.